Right now, as you're watching this, the color of your eyes is quietly telling a story that stretches back thousands of years. It's not just a detail about your appearance, it's a coded message from your ancestors, a biological record of where they lived, how they survived, and what the world looked like before civilization as we know it even existed. Most people glance in the mirror every single day without ever stopping to ask the question that scientists have spent decades trying to answer: why do human eyes come in so many different colors, and what does each one actually mean? Here is something that will completely change how you see yourself and everyone around you. Every single eye color you have ever looked into, whether brown, blue, green, gray, hazel, amber, or what appears to be black, is the result of a specific genetic story. Some of these colors evolved to protect against blinding sunlight on open plains. Others appeared suddenly in a single person and then spread across entire continents in just a few thousand years. And a few are so rare, so genetically precise, that only a tiny fraction of the entire human population carries them. This is not a story about beauty standards or aesthetics. This is a story about survival, migration, genetic mutation, and the extraordinary journey that brought the human species to every corner of the earth. By the time this video ends, you will never look at a pair of eyes the same way again. Because what you see in those irises is not just color. It is history, it is science, and it is one of the most fascinating chapters in the entire story of what it means to be human. So, let's begin. 1. Brown eyes and the power of melanin. More than 70% of all humans on Earth have brown eyes, and that is not a coincidence. Brown eyes are, in the most literal biological sense, the original human eye color. Before any mutations occurred, before any migrations reshuffled the genetic deck, every single human being who walked this planet had brown eyes. Understanding why requires understanding a molecule called melanin, and once you do, you will realize that brown eyes are far more extraordinary than they are ever given credit for. Melanin is a pigment, but calling it just a pigment undersells it dramatically. It is one of the most effective natural protective substances that biology has ever produced. In the context of the eye, melanin is packed into cells in the iris, and its primary function is to absorb light before it can cause damage to the delicate internal structures of the eye. In a person with brown eyes, the concentration of melanin is so high that the iris can absorb up to 90% of all light that enters it. Think about that for a moment. 9 out of every 10 photons that strike the iris of a brown-eyed person are simply absorbed and neutralized. For early humans living in equatorial Africa, where the sun is intense and UV radiation levels are among the highest on the planet, this was not a cosmetic advantage. It was a survival necessity. The ultraviolet rays in sunlight can cause serious damage to eye cells over time, increasing the risk of conditions that could impair vision and reduce a person's ability to function, hunt, navigate, and survive. Brown eyes acted as a built-in filter, a biological shield that guarded one of the most critical sensory organs against constant environmental assault. But the advantages of brown eyes go beyond just protection. Because melanin absorbs light rather than scattering it, people with brown eyes tend to experience significantly less glare sensitivity in bright conditions. When you are standing in direct sunlight, your brown-eyed vision remains clearer and more stable than it would with lighter eye colors. This is precisely why brown eyes are overwhelmingly dominant in populations living close to the equator, across Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. The environment selected for this trait relentlessly and effectively over tens of thousands of years. There is also something subtle and beautiful about brown eyes that most people miss. In standard lighting, they appear rich and uniform, almost solid in tone. But catch them in candlelight or low-angle sunlight, and something remarkable happens. Flashes of gold and amber appear at the outer edges of the iris as light plays across the different layers of melanin-containing cells. It is not a change in color, it is the physical structure of the eye itself becoming briefly visible, a reminder that what you are looking at is not a flat surface, but a complex, layered, living architecture shaped by millions of years of evolution. 2. Blue eyes, gray eyes, and the mutation that changed everything. Here is a fact that sounds almost impossible but is supported by solid genetic evidence. Every single person on Earth who has blue eyes is descended from one individual, one person, who lived somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, most likely in the region around the Black Sea. Before that person was born, blue eyes did not exist anywhere on the planet, and then, through a single genetic mutation, the entire visual landscape of human diversity was permanently altered. The mutation in question affected a specific gene involved in controlling melanin production in the iris. In most people, this gene is essentially switched on, ensuring that melanin is produced in sufficient quantities to give the iris a brown color. In this one individual, something changed. The gene was effectively switched off, dramatically reducing the amount of melanin produced in the iris. The result was a pair of eyes that appeared blue, not because they contained any blue pigment, but because of physics. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of blue eyes. There is no blue pigment in a blue iris. None. What you are actually seeing is a phenomenon called Rayleigh scattering, the exact same optical effect that makes the sky appear blue. When light enters an iris with very little melanin, the shorter wavelengths of light, which correspond to blue, scatter back outward while the longer wavelengths pass through. Your brain interprets this scattered light as blue. Blue eyes are, in a very real sense, an optical illusion produced by the absence of something rather than the presence of it. What makes this mutation's history even more astonishing is the speed at which it spread. In the span of just a few thousand years, blue eyes went from existing in a single person to being carried by the vast majority of the population across northern Europe. Scientists are still debating exactly why this happened so rapidly. One leading theory is environmental. In the far north, during long winters with limited sunlight, having less melanin in the iris might allow more photons to reach the retina, potentially improving vision in dim conditions. Another theory involves sexual selection. The idea that blue eyes were so visually striking and unusual that they became highly attractive to potential mates, causing the trait to spread faster than natural selection alone could account for. One of the most surprising discoveries in recent years came from analyzing ancient DNA extracted from early European remains. Researchers found that some of the earliest blue-eyed people in prehistoric Europe also had very dark skin, similar in tone to populations still living in Africa today. This single finding demolished a long-standing assumption. For decades, scientists had assumed that light eyes and light skin were part of the same evolutionary package, adaptations that developed together in response to low UV northern environments. The ancient DNA evidence proved otherwise. Light eyes evolved before light skin. They were separate adaptations that happened to occur in overlapping populations, not a single coordinated response to the environment. Gray eyes sit at an even more extreme end of the melanin spectrum than blue eyes. They are found in fewer than 3% of people worldwide and represent perhaps the lowest concentration of iris melanin of any eye color. Because of this extreme reduction, light entering a gray iris is scattered across a broader range of wavelengths rather than just the shorter blue ones, producing that characteristic steel-like neutral tone that can shift between silver and slate depending on conditions. Researchers believe gray eyes likely represent a further evolutionary step in the adaptation to low-light northern environments, maximizing light entry into the eye under chronically overcast skies. But that reduced melanin also comes with a cost. Gray-eyed and blue-eyed people are significantly more vulnerable to UV radiation than brown-eyed individuals, and they face higher long-term risks from sun exposure to their eyes without adequate protection. 3. Green eyes, hazel eyes, and the genetics of rarity. If blue eyes required one specific genetic mutation, green eyes require something far more complex. To produce a truly green iris, at least 16 different genes must interact in a precise and balanced way. The melanin concentration must be kept within a very specific range, neither too high nor too low. On top of that, a second pigment called lipochrome, which produces yellow tones, must be present in the right quantities. When light hits this exact combination of moderate melanin and lipochrome, the result is the distinctive green hue that only about 2% of the global population carries. That genetic complexity explains why green eyes are so rare. It is extraordinarily difficult for all the required genetic conditions to align simultaneously. One additional gene switched on or off in the wrong direction, and the result shifts toward brown, blue, or hazel. Green eyes exist in a narrow genetic sweet spot that is genuinely difficult to reach. And when they do appear, they come with a quality that sets them apart from almost every other eye color. They are chemically and optically unstable. Unlike brown eyes, which remain consistent under virtually all lighting conditions, green eyes are highly sensitive to changes in the environment around them. In shadow or dim light, they can take on a deep, mossy tone. In bright sunlight, they shift toward a vivid, golden green. Near certain clothing colors or against particular backgrounds, they can appear to drift toward hazel or even a cool blue-gray. This extraordinary range of expression has made green eyes a focal point of folklore, mythology, and cultural symbolism across history. They have been associated with mystery, intuition, creativity, and in some medieval European traditions, even supernatural ability. From an evolutionary standpoint, this sensitivity may actually reflect a genuine adaptive advantage in the variable environments where green eyes most commonly evolved. Temperate regions with dense forests, mountain terrain, and rapidly changing light conditions would have placed a premium on visual flexibility. The moderate melanin in green eyes provides meaningful UV protection while still allowing enhanced sensitivity to changing light, a balance point between the extremes represented by dark brown eyes and very pale blue or gray eyes. Green eyes are most prevalent in populations of Celtic and Germanic ancestry, particularly in parts of Ireland and Scotland, where in some communities the majority of people carry the trait. Hazel eyes take the concept of variability even further. If green eyes are dynamic, hazel eyes are genuinely chameleonic. A person with hazel eyes can appear to have green eyes in one moment, golden eyes in another, and brown eyes in yet another, sometimes all within the same day, depending on lighting and surroundings. This is not a trick of perception or wishful thinking. It is a real physical phenomenon driven by intermediate melanin levels, combined with traces of lipochrome, a combination that responds differently to different wavelengths and intensities of light. Hazel eyes affect around 5% of the global population and represent one of the most genetically diverse eye colors in existence. Two people who both have hazel eyes can look remarkably different from each other. One might display predominantly green tones with scattered brown spots, while another shows mostly brown with rings of gold and green. This variation within the same broad category makes hazel eyes one of the most unpredictable and expressive eye colors from a purely genetic standpoint. Their position in the middle of the melanin spectrum also gives them a genuine adaptive versatility, offering reasonable UV protection while maintaining solid light sensitivity across a wide range of conditions. 4. Amber eyes, black eyes, and the evolutionary conclusion. Amber eyes occupy a unique place in the human palette because they are produced in a fundamentally different way from most other eye colors. Where brown eyes get their color from high concentrations of melanin, amber eyes contain very low levels of melanin but very high concentrations of lipochrome, the same yellow pigment found in smaller amounts in green and hazel eyes. The result is a solid, unwavering golden or copper tone that does not shift with lighting the way hazel or green eyes do. Amber eyes remain richly golden under all conditions, and they are found in fewer than 5% of people worldwide. Interestingly, this same amber coloration appears frequently in predatory animals such as wolves, hawks, owls, and eagles, and some researchers have suggested that humans may carry a subconscious association between the amber color and qualities like alertness, focus, and intensity. Whether or not that association has any real biological basis, there is something instinctively striking about a pair of amber eyes that many people find difficult to explain. From an evolutionary standpoint, scientists believe amber eyes likely spread primarily through sexual selection rather than environmental adaptation, meaning their prevalence in certain populations is more likely driven by mate preference than by any direct survival advantage they confer. At the other end of the spectrum sit what are commonly described as black eyes, though scientifically speaking, truly black irises do not exist. What appears to be a black eye is actually an iris, with such an extreme and dense concentration of dark brown melanin that it absorbs virtually all incoming light, making it impossible to distinguish the iris from the pupil without very careful observation in bright conditions. These eyes represent the absolute maximum in melanin concentration and offer the highest possible level of natural UV protection of any eye color. They are most common in populations from equatorial Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, precisely the regions where UV exposure is most relentless and where evolution had the strongest incentive to maximize protective pigmentation. Beyond the functional aspects of these rarer eye colors, there is one more category worth addressing: heterochromia, the condition in which a person has two differently colored eyes, or visible color variations within a single iris. This affects fewer than 1% of the population and results from an uneven distribution of melanin during early eye development. Whether caused by minor genetic mutations, mosaicism, or localized developmental changes, heterochromia has captured human imagination across cultures and throughout history, often being interpreted as a sign of duality, special perception, or a unique connection to forces beyond ordinary understanding. That cultural weight speaks to something deeper: our instinctive recognition that eyes are not simply sensory organs but windows into identity, heritage, and story. And that is perhaps the most powerful takeaway from everything we have explored today. Your eye color is not a random cosmetic detail. It is a biological signature, a direct inheritance from the long chain of human ancestors who lived, struggled, migrated, adapted, and survived across thousands of years and on every continent of this planet. From the first humans shielding their eyes against the African sun with dense melanin shields, to a single individual somewhere near the Black Sea whose mutated genes eventually turned the eyes of half of Europe blue, to the precise genetic balancing act required to produce that rarest of greens, every color tells a chapter of our shared human story. So the next time you look into someone's eyes, take a moment to see past the color itself. What you are really looking at is thousands of years of survival, written in light, pigment, and the extraordinary lottery of human genetics.